Good morning and Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for joining me again this morning on Next on the Tee. I'm your host, Chris Mascaro, and today I have the honor and the privilege of having one of the greatest broadcasters of all time, the legendary Mr. Ben Wright, back on the show with me. Mr. Wright may also be the best storyteller anywhere on the planet as well. I had so much fun when he joined me back in November that I couldn't wait to have him back on the show with me again. We'll find out more about his fascinating life and stories when he joins me in just a moment. But before we get started, I want to kick off the show like we do every single week here on Next on the Tee by saluting the brave men and women serving in our military. We want to thank you for your daily sacrifices and all you do to keep the rest of us safe. We also want to thank those of you who serve or have served in every branch of the military and public service. We truly appreciate what you do every single day to preserve our freedoms and our liberties. It's through your strength and your efforts that our way of life is even possible. Our sincere thanks as well to Sean Cruz and all the wonderful folks over at the Armed Forces Radio Network. It's an honor for us to be a part of your network. You can find our show by going to armedforcesradionetwork.org. We also want to thank everyone listening in on iHeartRadio, as well as great radio sites across the internet like Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, Player.fm, and Blog Talk Radio as well. Also want to give a special shout-out to our good friends, Mike Kovacs, Ben Kerr, Mark Medeski, and the rest of the great staff over at LastWordOnSports.com. Check those guys out online and on Twitter as well. Their site, folks, absolutely fantastic and contains great content across every sport. Staff of writers are wonderful. You're going to love going to their site every day for your sports news. If you haven't been there yet, check it out and then bookmark it, lastwordonsports.com. Plus, if someone's dragging you to the mall or to the grocery store, or you're just tired of the same old on your commute, download the Player.fm or Stitcher app on your smartphone and take us with you. Let us give you something fun to focus on while you're out and about. Our show is brought to you by the great folks over at Kyvan Foods. Former Bengals and Falcons tight end Reggie Kelly has created a wonderful array of products. His salsas, sauces, and spices, all natural, and they're going to liven up everything you put out on your tailgate party, your house party, on your dinner table, the recipes that you have. Wow your friends, at your upcoming parties. Check them out. You can find them online. Kyvan is Kyvan. Their site is Kyvan82, the number 82. So it's Kyvan, Kyvan, the number 82.com. You can also find them at local Walmarts across the Southeast and up in Ohio as well. So check them out online, Kyvan82.com. All right, now back with me on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Mr. Ben Wright. Let me remind you about Mr. Wright's background because it's just absolutely amazing. He was educated at the Felsted School in Essex, England, and at London University. He served as a Russian interpreter in the British Army. In 1954, he became a sports writer, then a golf correspondent with the Daily Dispatch in Manchester and the Daily Mirror in London. Before becoming a freelance writer and broadcaster in 1961, he wrote weekly columns for The Observer and Sunday Times national newspapers and was a regular contributor to Time Magazine and Sports Illustrated. He did broadcasts for the BBC, both on radio and on TV, plus ITV, a British commercial network. He was a founder and associate editor of Golf World in the UK, joined the Financial Times as its first ever golf correspondent in 1966 and wrote a weekly column until 1989. In addition to serving as an announcer for CBS TV Sports starting in 1972, Mr. Wright broadcast for the BBC, ITV, Australian TV, and in New Zealand as well. From 1993 to 96, he hosted the golf feed of the Sun City $1 Million Challenge and broadcast the World Cup of Golf from Cape Town, South Africa in 1996. He's going to forever live in the hearts and minds of golf fans for his wonderful work that he did at CBS broadcasting the Masters, particularly my favorite, of course, the 1986 Masters with Jack Nicklaus's amazing victory. And I am so honored to have him back next on the tee with me this morning. Mr. Wright, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, and particularly giving me such a fulsome introduction. I'm almost embarrassed. It's a long time ago, though, Chris.
Well, like you said to me a couple of times, Mr. Wright, you've had a heck of a past.
Yes. Yeah, not much of a future, but heck of a past. I was very fortunate, Chris, to travel the world at other people's expense for a very long time in the front cabin. And, it's just been a wonderful journey, the whole thing. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed every moment of it.
Mr. Wright, I'm curious, I guess, starting at some of the stuff that's happened more recently, we'll travel back in time for sure, but a few weeks ago, Colin Montgomerie made a statement about Rory McIlroy that he is better now than Tiger Woods was at the height of his performance. What's your take on Colin Montgomerie's statement and making a statement like that?
I think it's a little premature. I think that Rory McIlroy has all the tools to outdo Tiger. But, he's got a terrible thing coming up next month in Dublin, Ireland, this legal battle between himself and his former management company, Horizon. And, it's not going to be easy for him to concentrate on golf and his avowed intention of winning the Masters here at Augusta in April with all these distractions that are blocking his path, as it were. I think he's brilliant. There's no question about it, and I always felt he would be from the first moment he caddied for me. But but I think Colin. I respect Colin Montgomerie's intelligence. He's a very, very smart man. But I think he got a little bit ahead of himself here. And I think really it's a little bit unkind to Tiger Woods, who has obviously gone back an awful lot now. And I would be very surprised if he ever wins another major personally, because the pressure of not winning a major has got so great now that there's something desperate about him when it comes to the weekend of a major.
So two interesting points that you just made, and I want to get to both of them. But first, you alluded to a moment ago that Rory McIlroy caddied for you, and I read that story. I believe he was 16 years old at the time and caddied for you. Do you mind sharing that story?
Well, not at all. I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of the kid, because I turned up at Royal Portrush with a party of Americans. I used to take these tours around the British Isles and Ireland, and I turned up at Royal Portrush one Monday morning, and the pro, who happened to be a Welshman, Di Stevenson, said to me, I've got a young caddy for you who's a little bit special. And I said, well, what's special about him? And he said, well, he's just won the club championship here at the age of 16. They allowed him to compete as a senior, although he's still, only a little boy of 16. And I said, well, bring him on. And so this little waif came round the corner, Rory McIlroy, and I said, good morning, Mr. McIlroy. Congratulations on your performance at the weekend. And he said, yes, I'm quite proud, Mr. Wright. I shot 70-71 in a 30-mile-an-hour wind. And,
wow.
I realized that small though he was, this kid obviously was chock full of talent. But I said to him, you better go and find yourself a pull cart, Rory, because I've got a big American tournament bag, and I've got a lot of stuff inside it, including waterproofs and so on, and even actually a bottle of scotch, in case it got really cold and mean, as it very often does at Portrush. And I was amazed when he said, "Mr. Wright, there's no bag on this God's green earth that I can't carry." And he proved it. He carried this enormous bag I had, and he clubbed me on every shot, and he read every putt for me, and I started bogey, double bogey, and shot 79, thanks entirely to his guidance. And so I gave him a 50-pound note, and Rory had never seen one of those before, and he was quite overcome. And what I shall never forget what he said. "I'm going to take this home to me mum and dad because of all the sacrifices they've made for me." And I thought to myself, boy, this kid's really got something special about him. And goodness me, he's proved it, has he not?
Yeah, absolutely right. You also mentioned the pressure of not winning a major being so great now for Tiger. And you know, obviously, as time goes on and as each one of those majors clicks away, the opportunity to reach, you know, the goal of Jack's 18 majors is, you know, becoming, I would imagine, more and more upon him. And you mentioned you don't think he's got it to get to that point. Why?
Well, you know, he's knocking on 40 years of age. And, of course, Jack Nicklaus won the Masters at the age of 46. But right. Tiger's body has taken an awful lot of a pounding in all kinds of ways. I mean, he won the U.S. Open on a virtual broken leg, which isn't going to improve the leg. I mean, the guy, Tiger, has really had a lot of hurt in these recent years, in addition to his emotional an upheaval and divorce and that kind of thing. I just think that, you know, he's on the wane. I can't see him being physically or mentally able to win majors anymore. And I was reinforced a bit by Dr. Bob Rotella, the famous sports psychologist, who said that he senses the desperation about Tiger when it comes to weekends at majors in recent years. And I thought a lot about that and watched it, and you know, seeing those short putts that he used to gobble up that now defy him, and so on, and the fact that, you know, he's always changing methods, and I applaud that he's declared, having watched a video that his mother, Peter, provided of him as a youngster, that he's going to go back to playing, hopefully by instinct and totally naturally, and not be this kind of manufactured person that he's become, particularly with Sean Foley, who I'm sure is a perfectly terrific teacher. Justin Rose certainly thinks so. But at the same time, made demands of Tiger that his body couldn't cope with. And I think, you know, that divorce from Foley was probably the best thing that Tiger could have done for himself at the time.
You have spoken with probably every great golfer, you know, in the modern era, and even some, you know, you obviously had opportunities to talk to Bobby Jones after his playing career. But speaking of Tiger Woods and the changing of methods, have you talked to anybody else who was at the level that Tiger has played at over the course of his career that has been through so many different swing changes?
No, I don't think I have ever met anybody who's messed around with a perfectly marvelous natural swing, which Butch Harmon particularly encouraged. I don't think I've ever come across anybody who's messed about with his swing quite so much and still maintained a position in the limelight. I've seen a lot of players who've changed their methods or even, for instance, changed their physical attributes. I remember distinctly there was a very good golfer many years ago out of California called Bob Lunn, who won back-to-back tournaments on the tour, and then someone made it quite clear to him that he was grossly overweight. He lost 60 pounds and couldn't play worth a lick thereafter and disappeared without trace, and I don't think I've ever met anybody who's made such radical changes in his method as has Tiger.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of, we talked about Rory a moment ago and young golfers. What's your thought about what you've seen so far from Jordan Spieth?
Oh, nothing but admiration. I mean, this kid recently, having won the Australian Open and Tiger's tournament in consecutive weeks, right. When you're going, halfway across the world with a time change of which really is the difference between night and day. I mean, it's a 12 or 13-hour time change, as I remember, and I found that very difficult to get over. And for him to win like that, he's finally starting to show the kind of results that his talent obviously makes him capable of. Once he got the first major victory away from home under his belt, I think that has been a great release for a lot of players, that they've gone abroad and won a championship abroad, and it gives them so much self-belief in surroundings that are so strange to them that they can come back and feel they can beat anybody. And I think, young Spieth is definitely the future face of American professional golf. There's no question about it. And there are several others, like young Reed and Billy Horschel and Chris Kirk. There's a host of young players waiting in the wings, as it were, to take over Tiger's mantle, and it's just a matter of who's going to do it. And I think, obviously, if you were making book on it, Jordan Spieth would be an odds-on favorite to be the number one American player of the future.
People, golf fans, from my generation who grew up idolizing either Jack Nicklaus or Arnold Palmer, so desperately wanted, there to be the sort of the next rivalry between Tiger and Phil, and I don't know that it ever got to the level that we wanted it to be. We wanted the Sunday showdowns at the majors between the two of them, and we very rarely got that. Could Jordan Spieth and a Rory McIlroy and some of the other younger players that you just mentioned, Mr. Wright, could that be the rivalry that we've always wanted? If we could get a Jordan Spieth to win a major, in 2015, could that be the next big thing that sort of picks up and carries the game of golf to the next level?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think, watching Rory and Jordan Spieth at the Masters, I can hardly wait, Chris. I can hardly wait. It is such a mouth-watering prospect because, you could have a wonderful and very long-lived rivalry here right. between the two young Turks from each side of the Atlantic, which would be a magical thing for the game of golf.
One of the things that I don't know that enough people remember about you and your career is you had a role in the movie Tin Cup, calling a shot that Kevin Costner's character Roy McIlroy, and talk about McIlroy, Roy McIlroy hit a bank shot off one of the porta-johns onto the green. What was it like for you being a part of that project?
Oh, it was infinitely boring most of the time because
right.
you spend so much time doing nothing. For instance, that take when Kevin Costner bounced the ball off the porta-john, it took 86 takes for that to be done correctly. I mean, and you couldn't blame Kevin, because it's an extremely difficult shot to bank anything off a porta-john and get it to roll straight up to the camera, which he did on the 86th take. But, you know, we had, I think it was 2,500 extras were providing the crowd scenes, and they had to surge forward 86 times, roaring with acclaim for the shot that he missed 85 times when it took a whole day. And, you know, those 2,500 people had lunch. They had breakfast, first of all, then lunch, and then supper. And when Kevin finally pulled off the shot, I mean, there was an absolutely crazy roar of acclaim because the guys and gals were so pleased that finally they were going to get out of there. You know, filmmaking and TV, live TV, are so far apart, Chris. For instance, they gave me a script when I arrived on location in Houston, Texas, that is, and which was supposed to be North Carolina, but the terrain was very similar, a lot of pine trees and sand. And they gave me a script in which I used 4 and 5 syllable words, and they had the crazy idea that an Englishman was supposed to do that. And I tore up the script on my first production meeting and said, look, Kevin, look, Ron Shelton, who is the director, you've been with us on the tour with CBS. They traveled with us for, I think, 18 months. And Kevin took golf lessons during that time from my sidekick, Gary McCord. And I said, you know only too well that I don't go up to the tower to broadcast with anything but a pairing sheet. And TV, live TV, must come off the top of your head to sound spontaneous. If you're going to read off a computer, it's going to sound like you're reading off a computer. And I think that's how some of the guys have gone wrong in this last decade or so, or maybe even 2 decades. It's almost 20 years since I was with CBS. And
right.
And I said to Kevin, I'm going to ad-lib everything I do in this movie. Ron Shelton can tell me what he wants me to do, but after that, I have to ad-lib it. And Kevin said, I don't believe that you can do that. So I said, well, you just come along with me. So actually, some of the scenes that survived the cutting room floor, as they say, Kevin Costner was under my desk. And I was busy ad-libbing, which was a lot of fun. But, I really found that it was quite boring waiting around. I remember my first morning there, I was told to arrive at 6 o'clock, so I was there prompt at 6, and a gentleman offered me coffee and a newspaper, which I accepted in my mobile dressing room. And I said to this chap, I hope you don't mind getting me these things, because I don't know where to go myself. And he said, I've got a little bit of information for you, Mr. Wright. I'm your stand-in. And as such, I'll do all the dirty work, and you all come in for the takes. And the poor chap had to sit there and do a whole heap of rehearsing, whereas I came in and shot the little sequence, as it were. So, there's a lot of hanging around in filmmaking that you don't get with the immediacy of live television.
Mr. Wright, there's something else that maybe not a lot of our listeners know about you, but you've also been a course designer. You're the architect for the Cliff Valley Golf Course up in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, which opened back in 1999 to rave reviews. Is that something you enjoy? Do you enjoy golf architecture?
Yes. You know something, Chris? When I was a youngster, I used to make golf course holes out of what you'd call funny putty, or we called in England plasticine. It's always been a total obsession of mine, and I got the opportunity to design some courses in the southwest corner of France for the Scottish and Newcastle breweries in a bygone age, and that gave me a real feeling for it. And then I 2 courses for the Earl of Warwick and Lord Bathurst, but the first gas crunch came about in 1973, 74, around about that time, and a lot of these courses were totally abandoned because no one could afford to get to them with the price of gas going through the roof. And so it wasn't until I came to America that I got the chance to do a course for Mr. Jim Anthony, who was the previous owner of the Cliffs properties, until he got a little overambitious, I suppose, and went belly up. And now we've got a management team in place that has ample funds. But more than that, Jim Anthony had never played a golf shop in his life, but he was a dealer in land and so on. But the thing was, with the team that has taken the Cliffs properties out of bankruptcy, they're all really good and keen golfers. The first CEO, who is now left, David Cessna, played to a handicap of 4, and Hugh Connerty, another director, was the leading amateur at the Dunhill Cup in Scotland 2 years ago, and he and his professional partner were 36 under par for 4 rounds. And he was playing off a 3 handicap, so you can't call him a sandbagger. I mean, he's just a darn good golfer. And they're all that way, and some of the real money has come from South Africa in the shape of Johan Rupert, who owns Cartier, Dunhill, Van Cleef and Harpels, and half of South Africa. So we're on a very good footing, but what is so good is that these are golfers as well as businessmen, and I think that is a huge advantage. I'm not trying to disparage Mr. Anthony in any way, because he was a genius who just overextended himself.
Mm-hmm. I read your book, Good Bounces and Bad Lies. It's a wonderful read, and I highly recommend it to our listeners. You can find it out on Amazon.com. You tell the story about how you went AWOL from the British Army back in 1953, shamelessly and without guilt, you said, so you could see Ben Hogan win the Open Championship at Carnoustie, which I find fascinating. Do you mind sharing that story?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, 3 buddies and I had bought ourselves a rather wheezy, ancient Austin 10 motor car, which was very much on its last legs. We got it for 40 pounds, like round about $80 to $100. So you got to know it was a pretty average wreck. And I commandeered it to go to Carnoustie when I was stationed at Crail Aerodrome at a joint services school for linguists. And I was on a refresher course in the Russian language, which was a couple of weeks or so. And it just so happened that the British Open was being played at Carnoustie, which is not very far away. So I commandeered the car and drove over to Carnoustie, found myself lodgings for £4 for the week, which was a real steal. And I watched every shot that Mr. Hogan played, both in practice, mostly at Panmure, nearby Carnoustie, and also the 72 holes of the Open in question. And he played his first two rounds with a Yorkshireman who was the professional at Ganton, which is a famous golf course in Yorkshire, called Bill Branch. And I talked with Bill Branch because Hogan made it abundantly clear that he wasn't going to talk to anybody when he was playing the game. And he shot 73, 71. And then on the final day, Friday, he shot 70 and 68, if memory serves me right. And, of course, this was only 4 years after he nearly lost his life in that terrible accident in which, in dense fog, he went head-on in his car into a coach and flung himself across his wife, Valerie, to save her, and as a result was gravely injured himself. And his one leg, was really bad. And I got to tell you, he limped up that last hole for the second time on the Friday. I mean, we're talking about the toughest golf course in the British Isles, and a long course. And this incredible creature, I say that with absolute reverence, to his way up the 18th fairway the second time around, and made his par for 68, the lowest of the four scores. It was just something, it was like a religious experience for me, because I had been very doubtful of Mr. Hogan declaring in Fort Worth, Texas, before he came, that he was coming over just to win the British Open, and he would not return to defend the title. I thought, what an arrogant so-and-so. But unfortunately for my stupidity, he proved himself absolutely incredible, and immortal in golfing terms. And when I first went to Fort Worth to do the Colonial National Invitation Tournament, for my newspaper, by the way, Financial Times, I wrote to Mr. Hogan, and he remembered me because he known that I walked every one of the 72 holes with him, and he invited me to his factory in West Pafford Street, Fort Worth, and took me all through the factory and made me then go to lunch with him at Shady Oaks. And after lunch, he made me hit practice balls. Well, I was so paralyzed by fear. I could barely get the club on the ball at all. And eventually, he said very sternly to me, "For God's sake, relax, young man. I'm not an ogre." And I managed to hit a few decent shots, and he made up a set of clubs for me to my specifications as he saw them. So it was a marvelous thing, and we later came quite close because he was a huge admirer of the CBS golf team and had a long-time friendship with Ken Venturi and my late boss, Frank Chikinian. And so it became a very happy relationship because Mr. Hogan put on a lunch for us at Shady Oaks every year on the eve of the Colonial National Invitation Tournament. And so it was very, very, very happy relationship. And until, alas, the great man came one year, and I can't remember which year it was, and he was quite deep into Alzheimer's, which, of course, eventually did him in. And I remember he didn't contribute anything during the lunchtime conversation. And eventually he said, "Valerie," to his wife, "you'll have to get me out of here. I can't cope anymore." And that was the last I ever saw of Mr. Hogan. Wow. Very sad, I'll tell you.
I bet. You mentioned Frank Chirkinian a moment ago, and I know that the two of you were dear friends, and he often would offer you some critiques of your work. But I'm curious, for all the time that you spent broadcasting the Masters and Augusta National and the perfectionist that Clifford Roberts was, did Mr. Roberts ever sit down with you and offer you critiques about things that you said or how the broadcasts were going?
No, but he wrote a letter to Bill MacPhail, the late Bill MacPhail, who was president of CBS TV Sports, after I'd made my debut at the 14th hole, which is the hole for all rookies at Augusta National. I made my debut there, and Mr. Roberts wrote to Mr. MacPhail saying, "The young Englishman Wright should be moved to a more prominent position." And when Roberts said "should be," you knew he had to be moved because Roberts' word was law. He ran the Masters with an iron fist in an iron glove. And I was moved to the 15th hole and stayed there for the rest of my career with CBS, which was a wonderful place to be. And I got the 16th hole on occasions too, after my guide and mentor, Mr. Henry Longhurst, passed away. So, I had absolutely, I thought, the prime seat on the golf course, and boy, did I enjoy that.
Speaking of Mr. Chirkinian, and you talked just a moment ago about Henry Longhurst, I read a story and I think we may even have touched on this a little last time, that Frank Chirkinian said the commentary between you and Henry Longhurst during the final round of the 1975 Masters, you at 15, Mr. Longhurst was at 16 at the time, the commentary between the two of you was the best golf commentary that he had ever heard. Take us back to that and what that was like and that conversation between you and Mr. Chirkinian was like.
Well, Chris, the 15th and 16th greens are so very close together that you if you're on one, you have to have a look what's happening on the other and sort of hold back until the crowd makes its incredible noises of applause and everything before you approach your putt. And in this instance, Tom Weiskopf and Johnny Miller and Jack Nicklaus were all battling, for this title. And Weiskopf made a magnificent birdie putt on 15, and the crowd went crazy. And I said that Weisskopf had made evil music to ring in Jack Nicklaus's ears, referring to the crowd. And Henry Longhurst replied very soon afterwards, when Nicklaus made his uphill putt from 40 feet on 16 for 2, that Mr. Nicklaus had replied with some evil music of his own. And, it was all rather, it was very, very exciting at the time. And I'm sure you remember, Chris, that Nicklaus finished first of the 3, and Weisskopf and Miller both had putts to tie him on 18, and both missed those putts, allowing him to be the champion. And it was, I mean, that was every bit as exciting as anything I ever saw in my life.
You spent so many years perched up there at 15 at Augusta National, getting a bird's eye view of some of the greatest moments in golf history, a place that I and I'm sure many of our listeners would just give a great deal to have been able to do. After the tournament, or perhaps before you went live on the air, did you ever take a mental step back and be amazed at yourself for what you were doing and what you had accomplished just to get there?
No. You know something? I never gave it a second thought, Chris. And you may say that's rubbish, but I really didn't. I just took it all for granted. It was just another day's work, as it were. And it was only after it's all happened that people started to come up to me and talk to me about 75 and 1986. And many other Masters, for that matter. Ray Floyd's runaway victory. But it was only after it had all stopped that people started coming up to me and saying, we'll never forget all on Nicklaus's eagle in 1986. And I realized then that, what I've witnessed and maybe been a small part of was some of the greatest things that ever happened in the game of golf.
Oh, there's no question that your calls made not only, obviously the players had to play and they create the magic, but the way that you painted that magic just made those moments that much better for the rest of us to be able to be witness to. I'm curious, Mr. Wright. So we were starting to talk a little bit about the 86 Masters and Mr. Nicklaus's achievements aside, but you were there on 15 when Seve Ballesteros hooks his ball into the water. Now, two things occurred to me. Either something, it had to feel like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that something either larger was at play or something else was amiss, because somebody of Seve Ballesteros' immense talents, to hit a golf shot like that, is just something that makes me scratch my head. Have you ever seen a player of that caliber at that time or in that sort of moment make a worse golf shot, if you will?
No, probably not. And you know why? Because by this time he had been so mind-boggled by the incredible reception that was accorded to Nicklaus at every turn. I mean, the noise was absolutely deafening for Nicklaus. That I talked with Seve, God rest his soul, many years later, and he admitted that he had hurried the shot because he was scared of the next roar that was going to come from Nicklaus's gallery. And I think that's probably the truth of the matter. Although at the time, I don't know whether I've told you the story, but Seve and I met the next morning after the event in the pro shop at Augusta National, where I always used to shop on the Monday morning for bargains, because everything was 50% off on the Monday after the Masters, and we were both, I suspect, shopping for bargains. And Seve got hold of me and said, you were extremely hard on me yesterday at the 15th hole. And I said, well, Seve, you played the shot. I didn't play the shot. It was a terrible shot. He said, no, it was not a terrible shot. It was a bad choice of club. And I said, well, that may be your opinion, Seve, but I'm sorry, I thought it was a very bad shot you played. Whatever club you played it with, it was a terrible shot. And he said, no. Anyhow, we had a serious difference of opinion, and we did not talk from that time, which was April, until the following February. Frank Chicane was hosting a lunch at Club 19 at Pebble Beach at the Lodge, and I was sitting there minding my own business and loving the fantastic sunshine with not a cloud in the sky in early February, and there was a tap on my shoulder. There was a little bit more than a tap, and I spun round, and there's Seve with that incredible smile of his, saying, Ben, it was an absolutely terrible shot. And he offered me his hand. We shook hands and were the best of pals thereafter. But Seve could be, he could be a little difficult. God bless him. He was certainly one of the great talents I've ever had the privilege to witness. But he could be difficult. There was a little arrogance, which probably made him the great champion that he was.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also remember on that broadcast, you mentioned Seve saying he heard the shot, not wanting to get the blast in the ears. And I remember on that broadcast, Tom Watson, who was sort of in the fringe of the leaderboard, being on 15 and sort of hurrying his putt. And I think it was your call that said that you felt sure that he hurried his putt. I don't remember if it was for Eagle or if it was, I think it was for Eagle on 15. He hurried it because he didn't want to get the blast in the ears. Did you think that several players were so aware of what Mr. Nicklaus was doing and the crowd reaction to it that it took them out of their games?
Absolutely. That was part of Jack Nicklaus's ability. He could so influence the conclusion of an event. He would take his rivals out of their game. There was some of his magic was this ability to produce when he most wanted it. And I watched a lot of his major championships, and I never ceased to be amazed how mentally Nicklaus would establish superiority as well as physically, of course.
Did you mentioned talking to Seve the day after? Did you have the opportunity to talk with Mr. Nicklaus following the round or the day after?
No, I never did. I never talked to him about it ever again, as a matter of fact. But
is that right?
Never. But funnily enough, many years later, I had not watched that final round of Jack's that was so epic. And a very good friend of mine, who's a golf professional in Connecticut at Tallwood Country Club in Hebron, Connecticut, I was his house guest for a tournament that he runs every year to commemorate his father, who was one of the great amateur golfers of all time in Connecticut. And this gentleman, John Nowabilski, sat me down and played me that last round of the Masters broadcast. And that was the first time I'd seen it. But you know what impressed me more than anything else? Chris. It was the periods of silence that only heightened the drama. And I could just imagine Frank Chirkinian, as he did very frequently, saying in your ear, "Shut up and let it play." And that's what I did, actually, at the 15th hole, after Nicklaus had holed his putt for his eagle. The noise was so great that I had never had the experience before and never had it since, that I couldn't hear a word that Frank Chirkinian said, if he said anything. So I said nothing, and this noise, you thought it had reached a crescendo, but it just went on and on and on until he reached the 16th tee. So I handed it over. Jim Nance was doing 16 at that time. And,
that's right.
That's
he and Weiskopf. And Weiskopf were calling 16.
Okay. And anyhow, I handed it over to them, and I apologized. We always had a cookout after the final round of the Masters at one of the rental houses we had at Westlake Country Club. And I apologized to Mr. Chirkinian, who incidentally had become my best friend in the whole world. And I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear. The noise was so great, I didn't hear if you said anything to me or what you said." And he said, "You did absolutely right by remaining silent and letting that crescendo batter the ears of the viewer." And he said, "I only wish some of your colleagues would have the good sense to shut up."
So, it sort of begs for me that, or the curiosity, if you will, is as this sort of wonderful event is unfolding before your eyes, and it's kind of like a marching band kind of comes through, and now it's kind of going off in the distance. Mr. Nicklaus, Eagles 15 and birdie 16, and then you see Ballesteros and the shot at 15 and sort of falling apart at 16, and now it's sort of off and away from you as it's going on to 17 and 18. How do you keep focused in a moment like that? Because you still have Greg Norman coming up behind you, so it's not like the event ended. They weren't the last two, twosomes playing that day. You've got more golf to talk about. How do you focus on that? But still, if it were me, I'm curious what's happening at 17, what's happening at 18, because this is such a great event. But you've got more golf to call.
Yes. Well, it was difficult because I wanted to be. I wanted to be walking with Nicklaus's group. Right. But there were others with a chance, and they couldn't take them. Norman's second shot at 18 being really a crucial error. But, you were so on a high. I found myself on such a high with when there was a finish like that, or that which had happened in the 75 Masters. When I left the booth, I couldn't believe how you came down. It was, like you just lost a close relative. It was such a depressing thing to even have to stop it. You want to do it all day and all night because it was so exciting. I don't know whether I make myself clear. I hope I do.
Yes, you do.
It was very depressing. I've got to tell you about my saddest moment ever at the Masters because I think it bears telling. It was the year that Fuzzy Zeller won, which was 1979, and I was very friendly with Ed Sneed, charming gentleman and a lovely golfer. And for that year and that year only, they had put my broadcast position at the end of the Saracen Bridge. In other words, low level instead of the high level that I broadcast every other Masters from. And they did it because the Television and Radio Committee believed that I hadn't been able to see whether the ball went in the water in the pond or not. So they wanted me to be there in a position to see whether the ball went in the pond or not, and therefore call it in passing instead of saying I believe that's destined to the water. You know, I had to be positive. They thought. Well, it so happened that Ed Sneed, who, as I say, was a good friend of mine, came by and he birdied 15 and now had a 3-stroke lead going to 16, 17, and 18. And he came by close, well, I would say probably 6 feet from me, and I said, I believe you've got it now, Edgar, which I called him because that was his name, actually. And he gave me the thumbs up. And then I, as quickly as I could, jumped in my golf cart and rushed back to the compound to watch things because, you know, that was the end of it for me unless the playoff, which started at 10, reached 15, and then I'd have to go back to the tower if there was a playoff. But I went back as fast as I could drive that cart, which is not easy with all those thousands of people there. Anyhow, I got to see 18 in the compound, and Ed by that time had bogeyed 16 and 17 and was on his way to bogey 18 to get into a playoff that he lost at the 11th hole to Fuzzy Zeller with Tom Watson, also a loser. And that was, for me, the saddest thing of all, because it virtually could have stopped to Ed's career. I mean, he never achieved the heights of that performance after he'd plumbed the depths by bogeying the last 3 holes. And it was, I found that was my saddest moment of all at Augusta.
Sad because you watched your friend bogey the last 3 holes, or sad because you said, you know, you sort of gave him the thumbs up that he had it at this point, and you feel like maybe that took him off his game?
Yes, a combination of both, Chris. It was a terribly sad occasion for me. I mean, it lasted no more than an hour, but it stayed with me ever since. And, you know, for a guy to have it won, to be 3 ahead with 3 to play, and somehow contrive to lose it was a really fearsome collapse, let's face it. You know, you can't argue with the facts. No,
and it's sort of reminiscent to me of, you know, what it was like for Mr. Palmer there when he had a big lead and, you know, having lost it to Gary Player. It seems very reminiscent of, you know, folks saying to Mr. Palmer, you've got it now, and, you know, double bogeying 18 to end up losing to Mr. Player.
Yes, exactly. And, of course, even worse, Palmer's debacle against Billy Casper in the U.S. Open at Olympic Club when he lost 9 strokes, right?
9 strokes, yeah.
And so, you know, there have been other moments, but this one was particularly poignant to me because I'd said, I believe we've got it now, and he agreed. That was a terrible thing, and I thought to myself afterwards, did I disturb his concentration? did I contribute to this debacle? And it's haunted me for quite a while.
Mr. Wright, last time, one more before we let you go today. I know last time we had talked briefly about how happy it would make you to have the opportunity to broadcast one more Masters. I mean, you're an Emmy Award winner. You were nominated multiple times for Emmy Awards. I know you were, at the height of CBS's broadcast of the Masters. Like I said to you a little while ago, and I think we talked about this last time. To me, you're part of the fabric of what made the Masters so great, and the opportunity that I had, several months ago, and finally, hearing your voice again on the radio. And God bless Matt Adams and Dominic Scarano for reaching out and getting you back on the air regularly on their show, Fairways of Life, which is on Sirius XM's PGA channel. But the opportunity to get another shot at broadcasting a Masters. And I don't understand, for someone who is so great and such a part of what made the Masters broadcast so great, why no one's reached out to you in the, like you say, near 20 years since you've done it last time. Is there any opportunity that we might get the opportunity to hear you again do something on a more national level?
Absolutely not, Chris. I don't think the current boss at the Masters, Mr. Billy Payne, likes me at all. So I don't think it's about to happen. But you win some, you lose some, and I would have loved to have done it, even though I'm not in touch with the young players as I used to be, because I'm on this mountaintop here. I don't mix with the players as much as I used to, but it would have been nice.
Why? What is it about Mr. Payne that you say he doesn't like you very much, or may not like you very much? Why?
Well, I've no idea. You'd have to ask him, Chris. I probably don't like limeys,
I hope that's not the case. Mr. Wright, remind our listeners all the things that you're doing now.
Sorry?
I said remind our listeners, although you're very involved in some charity events and raising money for some wonderful charities. Remind our listeners what you're doing now.
Well, I've got a couple of tournaments in my name for Meals on Wheels in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And we're close to 7 million net for a one-day event, and this year is going to be the 20th, and we're close to 7 million net. And I've got a tournament up in Michigan for junior golf, which has had a waiting list ever since they put my name on it. So it's been very, that kind of thing. That giving back is not a bad idea when you've taken as much from the game as I have.
Well, Mr. Wright, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your morning to join me again on the show. It's always such a privilege for me to get to hear your stories, and for our listeners to get to hear your stories. I hope you'll come back, periodically and share them with us, because every time I have the opportunity to have you on the show, to me it's like looking forward to Christmas, when I'm looking forward to that Saturday morning that you're going to be a part of the show, because it's such a thrill and such an honor for me to get to have the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. It's my pleasure, I can assure you.
Well, Happy New Year to you, to your family, and I look forward to the next time I get the opportunity to talk with you. In the meantime, I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope you'll come back very soon.
I shall, if you ask me. And Happy New Year to you, Chris. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Take care. Ben Wright, I'll tell you what, and I mean that absolutely sincerely. When I know he is going to be the guest on Saturday morning, it is absolutely like a kid looking forward to Christmas, because it doesn't get any better than Mr. Ben Wright. And the stories that he shares are absolutely wonderful and amazing to me. And it's a treasure trove of stories. And even to this point, having had him on and how gracious he's been to share a couple of hours out of his life with us on this show, I feel like we have just barely skimmed the top of all the great stories that he has. And I certainly look forward to the next time that I get the opportunity to share, hopefully more, and find out more about all the great things that he has accomplished over the course of his life. A wonderful man, and can't thank him enough for being a part of the show. All right, before we close up shop today, I want to remind you again about the new book that's out, A Golden 18, written by Roger Schiffman, and the photography by one of our good friends and one of the greatest photographers anywhere on the planet, Mr. Jim Mandeville. Jim, I'm sure you know, is the director of photography for the Nicklaus Companies. The book showcases some of Mr. Nicklaus's greatest course designs. The stories about the courses are wonderful, and the photography is just simply outstanding. In fact, they're so good, you're going to want to get a second copy of the book so you can take some pictures out, frame them, and stick them up on the wall. To get your copy, go to nicklaus.com and hover over Products and Partners, and then click on Books and Videos. If you love golf and stunning photography, you're going to love this book. All right, everybody, it is time for us to put a bow on this one. My sincere thanks one more time to Mr. Ben Wright for being such a great guest with me this morning, and for you for tuning in. You know we appreciate you the most. Please also check out our sister show, Thursday Night Tailgate, with me and my co-host Bob Lazari and our announcer Joe LaGenusa. That show airs live every Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find it live on Blog Talk Radio. You can also find us, like I say, on the Armed Forces Radio Network. On Friday nights, Boost Radio broadcasts us. They rebroadcast the show from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time every Friday night. We're joined every single week by some of the biggest names and some of the greatest legends from around the National Football League, plus the Canadian Football League as well. So please check us out. You can find both shows online, like I say, at nextonthet.net and ThursdayNightTailgate.com, and give us a like on Facebook. That's important to us, too. You can stream or download any of our archived episodes for either show for free, and stay up to date with our future guests by checking out our website. Again, nextonthet.net for this show, ThursdayNightTailgate.com for our sister show. Again, thanks for choosing to listen to the show today. I appreciate you the very most. Until next week, hit 'em straight, my friends.